Well, trust has always played an important role in buying goods or services. The 2019 Edelman Trust Barometer takes a look at the issue in a special report called In Brands We Trust. It surveyed 16,000 people in 8 countries. 81% say that brand trust is a deciding factor when they're considering a purchase. And that ranks only behind quality, convenience, value, and ingredients. But it also found that most brands are still failing the trust test. Only 34% trust most of the brands that they buy or use. My colleague Tanya Rivero sat down with Richard Edelman, president and CEO of Edelman, to discuss.
All of a sudden, consumers are ranking trust in brands as a really important reason for buying. And it's just risen straight up right after ingredients and availability and quality is trust.
And so how important is trust to consumers in a brand? What does that mean for the brand?
Well, basically, 2/3 of people say I'm a belief-driven buyer. And it sort of implies that they're putting a lot of belief in the idea that brands can make change and not just talk about it and do advertising.
And this means that that buyer will come back and be a loyal customer?
Well, in fact, by 2 to 1 more loyal, by 2 to 1 advocate for the brand on social, by 2 to 1 if there's a crisis, speak up. So it's a really substantive change. But the thing that brands have to do is they actually have to do action. They can't just do communication. And they have to, for instance, the Dove Men's is advocating for paternity leave. And all of a sudden, this is something that they're not just advertising, they're actually pushing for legislation. That's a completely new position for brands.
So brands are becoming they're becoming lobbyists in a way, not necessarily for their industries only, but for some sort of societal ideal.
They're speaking up for their consumers.
Right.
Consumers are feeling, in fact, that they get more from buying brands every week at the store and moving those brands to being social activists than they are at voting every 4 years. So it's brand democracy.
Your survey also points out, though, that consumers are nobody's fool. The brands have to be authentic. Consumers can't be tricked into thinking that you have some sort of social agenda when you really don't.
It's a stunning statistic. 80% of people say, I think that trust in my brand is really important reason to buy. Only 30% say that brands are delivering on it. So that 50-point gap tells you that you can't do brand washing, you can't just buy people's attention and loyalty. You actually have to earn it by action.
So consumers can tell when the brand is not being genuine.
Yes, and they want a Starbucks to take the plastic straws out of the stores and do sustainability, not just market it.
And are consumers willing to give a brand a second chance if they feel the brand failed them once?
They are, if they have trust in the brand. It is a fundamental now that you can't just talk, the Gillette campaign about how young men should treat women. That was just marketing. Now we need there to be truth and action. It's a big change. Live your values.
Live your values. Now, it's also interesting to point out how advertising has changed. Does advertising have the same impact it once did, or have influencers and social media sort of filled some of that void?
3/4 of people say, I block out advertising, whether through going to, places like Netflix or actually ad blockers. But they also said that if I trust a brand, I'm giving it a lot more permission to advertise to me. And so it bespeaks that it's the right spokesperson. So influencers are much, much more powerful, 6 times more powerful than celebrities. And I want to hear it from someone who I identify with, not somebody who's just famous.
That's so interesting. So yes, I saw in the sort of hierarchy of who consumers want to hear from, they want to hear from someone like me, an influencer, and celebrities are way down on the list.
Well, it bespeaks again, I need to hear a story multiple times also. The first time I hear it, I only get 30% of people to trust a message. After the 6th time, it's 85%. So there's a skepticism born of, experience, and we have to have better.
Right. And do you think that consumers actually believe, though, that brands can make the sort of change they expect their, elected representatives to make, or their government to make?
Brands are sort of the last man standing. We've been so disappointed in government, it's so divided and so political, and you know, we need business to stand up and speak up for us, and brands are the personal representation of that. And there is big belief in brands and big hope for brands. Look at the Nike campaign with Kaepernick. All of a sudden, there was a big discussion for weeks about, you know, was it the right thing to kneel at the game? Wasn't it? And it actually moved the conversation forward, and their sales went up.
Richard, do you have any other examples of brands that were really able to utilize the trends that we're talking about?
Well, I love PayPal, for instance, during the federal stoppage last year, and workers didn't have any money. They gave loans to people who were out of work. And that's, again, a brand bespeaking its values, wanting to be a financial partner.
That is an extraordinary position for a brand to take. So what's the takeaway here, then, for brands that want to separate themselves from the pack?
It's a new day. You can't just advertise and expect people to believe you. You have to do something. You have to live your mission. And you have to actually take the risk of doing it. And it's a bigger risk not to do it. Because you won't actually get any belief.
And you said, though, beware of trust washing, as you put it, right?
Well, half the people in our study say, I'm victim of trust washing. Look for truth. Look for people who can talk to you as if we're talking. And the idea of buying it no longer works.
Richard Edelman, thank you so much for coming to see us. It's a pleasure, as always.
Thanks so much.